The first time I realized Karen had used my ranch address, I was standing beside my front gate with a fence staple in my mouth and a hammer in my hand. I had been repairing a section of wire where a delivery truck had clipped the corner post the week before. It was a quiet morning, the kind of morning where the dust hangs low over the gravel road and the cattle barely lift their heads when a truck passes. Then two vehicles pulled up. One was a county car, and the other was a certified mail carrier. That alone was enough to make me stop working. The woman from the county tax office stepped out with a clipboard and asked if I was the legal representative for the Silver Creek Agricultural Preservation Trust. I told her I had no idea what that was. She looked down at her paperwork, then back at my gate. "Is this 1847 County Road 16? I said yes. She asked if the trust operated from this address, and I said no. The mail carrier handed me a stack of certified envelopes, all addressed to a trust I had never created, a program I had never joined, and a project I had never heard of. My ranch address was listed as the mailing address, business address, and agricultural base location for something connected to Silver Creek Estates, the HOA across the road. Then I saw the contact name, Karen Whitmore, the HOA president, the same Karen who had spent years calling my ranch an eyesore from one side of her mouth and a valuable rural view from the other. The county employee explained that her office was conducting a verification check tied to agricultural preservation filings, tax benefits, grant documentation, and a financing package connected to land improvements. She said the project value listed in the file was approximately $7.2 million. $7.2 million, using my address, using my ranch, and using my legal footprint like it was a prop in Karen's paperwork. Before I could even process that, Karen's white SUV turned off the main road and rolled up beside the county car. She got out fast, smiling too hard, acting like she had arrived just in time to smooth over a misunderstanding. She called it an administrative convenience. She said my ranch was part of the Silver Creek Community Influence Area, claiming the preservation corridor benefited everyone. She said the address was only used to anchor the rural character of the project and did not affect my ownership. I told her to remove my address from every document immediately. Her smile disappeared. Then she said, if I created trouble, the county might need to take a closer look at my agricultural use, my fencing, my runoff, my creek access, and my outbuildings. That was the moment I understood. She was not confused. She was actively threatening me for objecting to the use of my own address. Karen thought this was a simple paperwork trick. She thought if something looked official enough, nobody would question it until the money was already approved. But county records do not just show what people claim, they show what people tried to hide. And when my attorney pulled the filings, we found far more than a wrong address. We found a fake preservation trust, misleading grant language, inflated improvement costs, tax benefit claims tied to land the HOA did not own, and a $7.2 million financing package built entirely around the illusion that my ranch was part of their project. Karen had not stolen my fence, and she had not moved my gate. She had stolen something much quieter. She had stolen my ranch on paper. 1847 County Road 16 was not just where mail arrives. It was on my family's private property, not HOA common area, and not a scenic amenity. It was on the deed, the water records, the grazing agreements, the equipment loans, the old veterinary invoices, and the county map that still showed our lane before Silver Creek Estates ever had paved streets or decorative entrance lights. My grandfather used to write the address by hand in block letters, so clean you could read them from across a kitchen table. When I inherited the ranch, that address became my responsibility. The place itself was not fancy. A white farmhouse with a tin roof, a red barn, 2 pastures, a gravel drive, a creek running through the back section, and a line of cottonwoods that turned gold every fall. We had a few cattle, some leased grazing, old fencing that always needed work, and more dust than money. But it was ours. Not HOA common area, not developer reserve land, and not a scenic amenity. It was ours. Silver Creek Estates was built after the county widened the road, and developers discovered that people with money would pay extra to live near open land they did not have to maintain. Their sales brochures showed my pasture in the background, and their website used phrases like rural elegance and preserved country views. Nobody asked me before using those photos. At first, I ignored it. I had learned that fighting every little insult from a neighboring HOA can become a full-time job. Their land was across the road, and my ranch was mine. As long as they stayed on their side, I stayed on mine. Then Karen became HOA president. Karen had a talent for turning other people's property into community talking points. She called my ranch a shared visual asset, and my creek line part of the neighborhood's environmental identity. She once said at a public meeting that Silver Creek's property values were tied to the continued preservation of the ranch landscape. The ranch landscape, not my family's land, and not my deeded property, but a landscape. That was how she talked when she wanted to erase ownership, without sounding like a thief. She started small. She asked if the HOA could photograph the old ranch gate for a community newsletter. I said no. She asked if residents could use my creek road for a charity nature walk. I said no. She asked if I would sign a community partnership agreement supporting preservation values. I asked her what rights it would give the HOA, and she stopped replying. Then came the pressure. Letters about dust from the gravel road, questions about runoff, comments about my fencing, and complaints that my cattle created an odor when the wind shifted toward the HOA clubhouse. None of those letters had legal force. I was not in Silver Creek Estates. I did not pay dues, and I did not sign their covenants. But Karen wrote every letter as if her authority simply needed time to spread. The certified letters did not stop after that first morning. They multiplied. One came from the county tax assessor, asking for verification of agricultural preservation use. Another came from a state grant administrator, requesting updated compliance information for the Silver Creek Agricultural Preservation Trust. A third came from a lender's compliance department, asking for clarification on site control documents tied to a community preservation corridor financing package. Then came one that referenced environmental improvement funds tied to fencing, drainage, and agricultural visual preservation connected to my ranch address. I had signed nothing, authorized nothing, and had not given Karen, Silver Creek Estates, any trust, any consultant, any lender, or any grant administrator permission to use my property in any application. I drove to the county office that afternoon, and the file was worse than I expected. My ranch address appeared as a rural base address, an associated agricultural site, and in a project narrative describing a preservation corridor adjacent to and integrated with Silver Creek Estates. It appeared on maps shaded in pale green, the kind of color planners use when they want land to look protected and peaceful. My parcel was not transferred, but it was included visually. To ordinary people, a shaded map looks like ownership. It looks like permission, and it looks like the ranch is part of the plan. Karen knew that. A week later, Silver Creek put up a new sign near their entrance. Silver Creek Preservation Corridor, Protected Agricultural View. The sign faced my pasture, not theirs. Behind it, across the road, were my cattle, my creek line, my barn, and my house. Residents began stopping near the entrance to take pictures. One realtor nearby was telling buyers that Silver Creek had secured a rural preservation partnership to protect the area from development and improve the natural buffer. I confronted Karen at the HOA entrance the next day. She was standing near the new sign with 2 board members and a landscape consultant. I asked why my ranch address was in county and grant records. She acted offended that I had looked, saying the address was used only because my ranch formed the historic rural anchor for the corridor. She said no one was claiming to own my property. I asked if she had signed my name anywhere. She smiled and said, Not everything requires your signature. That sentence should scare any property owner. I told her again to remove my address, my parcel, and any reference to my ranch from every filing. That was when the friendly language completely ended. Karen said withdrawing the address could destabilize a $7.2 million package that had taken the HOA years to build. She said residents were counting on those funds for drainage, trail buffers, green space protection, and landscape improvements. She lowered her voice, stating that county officials might be very interested in whether my ranch was truly compliant with agricultural use rules. She mentioned fencing, water runoff, outbuildings, and creek management. It was a threat dressed like concern. She had used my address without permission, and now she was warning me not to object. My attorney's first instruction was simple: get everything, not summaries, and not screenshots, certified records. So I spent the next several days moving between offices: county recorder, tax assessor, planning department, state business registry, and the grant administration portal. I requested every document connected to the Silver Creek Agricultural Preservation Trust. The trust registration listed my ranch address as the principal mailing address. The project narrative listed my ranch as an associated agricultural site, and the financing summary described a rural preservation corridor supported by agricultural continuity, open view protection, and community buffer improvements. The map shaded my property as though it belonged inside the corridor. There was no deed from me, no easement, no conservation agreement, and no signature. My attorney explained the strategy. Karen did not need to claim full ownership to mislead people. She only needed to create enough implied connection that grant reviewers, residents, lenders, and county officials believed the HOA had lawful coordination rights over the land. That illusion was worth immense money, $7.2 million, according to the lender documents. HOA meeting minutes showed Karen had told residents the preservation corridor would protect the rural edge, strengthen property values, and secure outside funding. She said Silver Creek had successfully coordinated with surrounding agricultural interests, but she completely omitted the part where the owner of the main ranch had refused every single partnership request. A consultant invoice listed agricultural site coordination, but nobody coordinated with me. Another invoice listed boundary documentation and corridor mapping, but nobody contacted my surveyor. A grant budget included fencing improvements, drainage stabilization, habitat buffer work, and trail screening near the ranch edge, yet none of that work had been authorized on my property. My attorney read the final filings, shook his head, and said, "This is not a typo. One wrong address can be a mistake. A wrong address repeated across trust filings, grant applications, tax materials, maps, invoices, meeting minutes, and financing documents is an active system." We built a massive binder of evidence and sent formal demand letters to Karen, the HOA board, the county assessor, the county planning office, the grant administrator, the lender, and the HOA's insurance carrier, demanding an immediate fraud and compliance review. The first institution to react was not the HOA. It was the lender. Money gets nervous far faster than people do. Within 48 hours of receiving my attorney's letter, the lender's compliance department suspended review of the $7.2 million financing package. Once the lender paused, everyone else started looking. The grant administrator requested documentation showing authority. The county assessor opened a full review of tax-related representations. The planning office asked for corrected maps, and the state registry flagged the trust's address pending verification. Documentation was exactly where Karen's story failed. The grant administrator officially suspended the funding connected to the preservation corridor, and the tax assessor stated that any benefits derived from inaccurate property representations could be subject to repayment and penalties. The consultant tried to distance itself, claiming mapping was based on information supplied by the HOA. They said all property rights were to be verified by the applicant, and that the use of the ranch address was provided directly by Silver Creek representatives. Karen tried to blame the consultant, but the consultant produced clear emails. In one of them, Karen wrote that the ranch address should remain on the project materials because it gave the preservation corridor a stronger agricultural anchor. In another, she wrote that the owner was not cooperative, but the land's relationship to Silver Creek was central to the funding narrative. Not cooperative. That was how she described me refusing to let her use my property. The board found out the financing freeze was real. Silver Creek residents had been told the preservation corridor would fund major improvements without heavy dues increases, drainage repairs near the lower lots, trail landscaping, stormwater work, and creek buffer planting. Now all of it was on hold because the project documents leaned on land the HOA did not control. Karen sent a message to residents calling it a paperwork challenge, caused by an adjacent landowner objecting to community progress. My attorney answered publicly through a letter to the HOA. Silver Creek Estates is not correcting a paperwork challenge. It is correcting the unauthorized use of another owner's legal address and property identity in financial, tax, grant, and planning materials. Karen had moved the ranch in paperwork, and once that paperwork was examined, the whole structure fell. The public meeting was announced as a special session on preservation corridor funding, but by then, everyone knew what that really meant. The clubhouse was full before the meeting even started. Residents came with printed emails, budget pages, and screenshots from the old HOA newsletter where Karen had bragged about securing the rural preservation future of Silver Creek. Karen sat at the front table with the board, the HOA attorney, the management company representative, and a consultant who kept shuffling papers. A county planning official and a representative from the grant administrator were present, and a sharp written statement from the lender was read into the record. Financing suspended pending compliance review. Collateral assumptions under review. Project risk narrative under review. And third-party property references unresolved. Karen tried to interrupt, saying the financing was only paused, but a man in the back asked exactly how much money was at risk. The treasurer admitted the package was approximately $7.2 million. That number completely changed the temperature in the room. Residents started asking questions all at once. Who approved using the ranch address? Why did the newsletter say Preservation Partnership if there was no partner? Who signed the trust documents? Who approved the consultant invoices? Why was my address used as the principal mailing address? Who received mail sent there? Did Karen intercept anything? Did the management company know? Had residents voted on a project that depended on land the HOA did not own? My attorney placed the certified deed, the title search, and the Silver Creek brochure on the screen. One of these sells a dream, he said. The other two show the law. The developer's representative stood up next, stating they had relied entirely on representations from the HOA, that land control was being secured through the HOA. The developer was preparing to blame Karen and the board. She had promised far more than she could prove. Then a buyer spoke. He asked who was refunding their reservation deposits. Karen's face flushed red. She claimed the board had acted in the best interest of residents, claiming my ranch reduced the potential of the community and that one stubborn landowner should not hold back hundreds of families. An older homeowner stood up. He had lived in Silver Pines since the first phase opened. He looked at Karen and said, "You did not try to buy his land. You tried to sell it first and ask later." The room went completely silent. The meeting ended with the board voting to suspend the project entirely, terminate the unauthorized use of my ranch address, and commission an independent investigation into Karen's filings. The $14 million expansion deal never closed. Not postponed, not redesigned, but completely dead. The HOA had to record a corrective affidavit stating it held no ownership interest, no option, no easement, and zero authority over Willow Creek Ranch. Those documents were formally recorded with the county, so the title chain would show the correction clearly. They fully covered my title attorney fees, survey costs, recording fees, title clearing expenses, and substantial damages related to the cloud on my title and the unauthorized marketing of my property. The developer terminated its agreement and demanded heavy reimbursement from the HOA. Residents eventually voted Karen out as HOA president, the treasurer resigned, and the HOA adopted a strict new rule requiring independent title verification before any board member could discuss land acquisition, expansion, or easements in public. It arrived $14 million too late. I kept the ranch, no estate lots, no clubhouse annex, and no luxury expansion road through my pasture. The hay barn stayed precisely where it was, the creek road kept its old name, and the north pasture went back to being grass instead of a drawing in somebody's brochure. I replaced the sign at my gate to read, "Private 1,800-acre ranch, not a Silver Creek property. Address use prohibited." A lie does not always arrive wearing a mask. Sometimes it arrives printed on glossy paper, backed by a board vote, and wrapped in words like progress and community benefit. But property does not transfer because people want the story to be true. It transfers through deeds and recorded documents. I won because I checked the records, got certified copies, and refused to let the phrase administrative convenience cover up the unauthorized use of my legal identity. So, if an HOA, developer, neighbor, or board president ever acts like your property is just part of their community dream, do not argue with their confidence. Ask for the recorded document. Ask for the deed. Because sometimes the biggest threat to your land is not someone standing on it. Sometimes it is someone writing it into a file you were never supposed to see. If this story made you think of family land, an address dispute, or an HOA that used deception to secure a project, leave your thoughts in the comments. Share this with someone who needs the reminder, and stay subscribed for more stories where patience, paperwork, and property lines make the right people pay.